Tim, from your point of view, what's it like when you've seen work that you've written in a novel or short story form adapted into a screenplay and put on screen?
So the two films I've had made from my work have been quite sort of different experiences for me. I'll always say I've had quite a few things optioned and taken to script and developed, and generally what happens is they die and the project fades away and it never reaches the screen. But every now and then, probably 5 or 6 times, I've had something optioned by a producer, and then they hire a screenwriter, adapt it, and I see the script. And I'm always very conscious that once you sign the contract, once you sign the option, it's not your project anymore. But my book's always on the shelf, and my story's always published as it is. And the film's always going to be a different beast. So I'm very prepared for that to happen. Obviously, I'd like it if somebody options a book and buys the rights and makes a film. I want it to be really good. I'd love it to be really good, but if it's very different, or if it's not as good as I'd hope it would be, then the writing, the novel, and the written story still stands as its own thing. You know, you mentioned The Silence and Pay the Ghost. The Pay the Ghost, I didn't have any involvement in as the writer of the short story. So I did see the script when it was first developed, which I really liked. And I think the film came out okay. You know, Nicolas Cage is not in his manic phase in the film. He's acting. I love Nicolas Cage, and I love all the aspects to him. So that film came out okay, although very different from the story. The Silence was sort of opposite. I was a bit involved in development, so I sort of got friendly with John Leonetti, the director. So I was looking at script pages and things like that. Uncredited, I must say, but it was the fact that they were involving me. So, but even with that, I was always very conscious that it wasn't my story anymore. Essentially, it was the filmmaker's story. So, and I think you have to not be precious about stuff like that, really, as a writer.
Because the short stories and the books, as you said, will always still exist, and they are separate mediums, aren't they? And I think that
totally.
Would you say the two, in your case, with the films, your short stories that have been adapted, would you say that they complement one another, or that they're very different, or?
I think Pay the Ghost became quite a very different story. Credit on it is based. I'm looking at my poster. It's based on the novella. It was a long short story. It was like 8,000 word short story. So they developed it and added background and character histories and things like that. The Silence is actually much closer to the book, and honestly, I think I really like The Silence. I love the film they made from it. I think it could have done with another 15 minutes at the end. Whether that's down to budget or not, I don't know. But yeah, it was, and interestingly, when I was sort of unofficially working with John, the director, he'd come to me and say, we got a slight problem with the script. We're not quite sure what to do with it. And not because I'd written the novel, but often my sort of solution was, let's take it back towards the book a little bit. And I'm very pleased with both of them in different ways, you know.
Yeah, I remember, I think it was Simon Mayo. He'd written several books, and he wrote a children's book, and he said, seeing it come to life, sitting in Australia, seeing these words that he'd written on the kitchen table a couple of years ago being acted out with this big production is quite a surreal thing. But it's interesting with what you said with The Silence about how they were really conscious of that source novel and going back to it. And I think one thing Peter Jackson did when adapting Lord of the Rings was he would actually read sections from the book before directing a scene, because he was obviously so conscious of ensuring that it was a faithful adaptation and so aware of that. And with something as vast and as big as that, I guess the important thing is that you really don't want to disappoint the many legions of fans of the book with Lord of the Rings and other loved things like Harry Potter and Game of Thrones. I think that's quite a key thing.